three wise women who visited the baby? The answers are, they would have asked for directions, they would have arrived on time, they would have helped deliver the baby, and brought practical gifts like diapers, blankets, and baby clothes. Most likely, they would have cleaned the stable and brought casseroles. True, right?
Oh, yes.
Now we know that's not what happened according to the author of Matthew. So let's talk about this story in Matthew for a little bit. Have you ever thought about who these men were? How many men were there? Where did they come from exactly? How long did their journey take? What sort of men were they? Was it like the hymn we just sang? Were they really kings? Did they have names? How were they dressed? Over the centuries, countless legends, stories, and paintings, not to mention Christmas cards, have given us all sorts of ideas about these men. Sometimes we see them all decked out in robes of brocade, with crowns of gold and jewels on their heads, as they ride on majestic camels. Maybe they arrive at the manger on horses with bodyguards who are watching over the men in all their splendor. And always, always, there is a beautiful, bright, white star just off in the distance, guiding them on their way. Now, it could be that you're thinking back to all of those wonderful Christmas pageants where young boys stumble down the aisle in their dad's bathrobes with drapey cords wound around their waists. These youngsters may be valiantly attempting to balance cardboard crowns on their heads while they carry their treasures for the baby Jesus who is lying so quietly up on the stage. No matter what you may or may not know about these wise men, I'm sure you believe that no Christmas is complete without them. We love these men. They are every bit as important as the shepherds and angels, cows and sheep. And finally, there's the star. Where would we be without the star? That guiding light that kept leading the men on their journey. Thank goodness for the star. At least it ended up leading the men to Jesus in the end. But first, these men took a detour through Jerusalem. Now then, if you really listen to the story unfold this morning, you might just realize that we weren't told how many men there were. We don't know exactly where they came from, other than from the general direction of the east, wherever that might be. And we're never told these men are kings. Wise men, yes, but not kings. And even though some of you may proudly point out that you know their names, the gospel writer never actually named them. In fact, the names Melchior, Gaspar, and Balthasar come to us from legends added to the story over the centuries. You know, it almost seems as though we have made up most of the story in order to fill in all of those gaps that Matthew left for us. Maybe all of those holes in the story make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. And we might begin to wonder just why this story is included in the gospel at all. Well, there's some very good reasons for the author of Matthew to tell us this wonderful and mysterious story. This is a story of hope and fulfillment. The bright bright white star shone in the wise men's eyes for a long time. Some scholars believe these men read the scriptures from Isaiah we just heard, and as the bright white star appeared, they set out in hopes of finding the promise that Isaiah described. They lifted up their eyes, looked around, and decided to set out on a journey that could lead them from darkness to light. This is also a story about God's all-encompassing love. These wise men weren't local people. They came from a great distance. Some writers speculate they actually came from what was enemy territory. They most likely didn't look like the people of Israel at the time. In other words, these men were outsiders. They were foreigners, strangers, and they were invited and welcomed into God's circle of love and grace. Later, as Jesus went around his ministry, we hear the stories of God's love reaching out to ostracized lepers, immoral prostitutes, despised Roman soldiers, greasy tax collectors on the make. This wise man's story is truly a story about God's unconditional welcome. And this is a story about surprises and the unexpected. According to Matthew, the wise men who were looking for a new king decide to show up in Jerusalem looking for a palace. Naturally, kings live in palaces, don't they? And what do you know? They knock on King Herod's door, who is startled, to say the least. He's almost speechless when the men walk in and announce they're looking for a new king. Poor Herod isn't sure what to do. So he consults with his own wise men, who turn around and consult their charts and scrolls and decide that maybe these strange guys could be right. There could be a new king who is living out there in that podunk little town of Bethlehem. And that's when our wily King Herod gets the bright idea to send the men down the road a few miles to find out for themselves if there is a new king. Now, if truth be told, Herod is frightened right out of his golden sandals. The last thing Herod needs is competition. So he begins to plot and scheme. But that's another story. Anyway, as you know, the king these wise men were searching for wasn't to be found in a palace. Instead, what they found was an ordinary baby with ordinary Mary and Joseph as proud parents of a newborn son. Once upon a time, there was a man who sat on top of his camel in the middle of the desert. He was enormous. His bushy gray beard was as big as the bejeweled cloth crown that he wore on his head, and his portly body was woven together with clever magic, decorating the rotund results of too many feasts in embroidered silk. The glittering golden rope around his waist disappeared somewhere between two rolls of fat. I am returning from a visit to Bethlehem, he explained dramatically to a merchant who stood below him on the sand, staring up at the gestures of the speaker, who wore a ring on every chubby finger. The camel's rider let out a booming laugh. "Just call me the wise man," he said. "And you?" The itinerant salesman shrugged. "Call me the merchant," he replied, mounting his fuzzy camel, which was tied to a string of other heavy-laden beasts of burden. "There's water ahead," the merchant said, nodding. He motioned to the three men behind him, who each led 6 camels. Their bodies were weighed down with merchandise that scented the scorched afternoon with cinnamon cloves and anise, which mixed with the smell of perspiration and animal. It would be safer if we traveled together, and the wise men agreed. When they reached the oasis, the merchant pulled out dried fruit, dates, a loaf of hard bread, and a leg of lamb from his pouch, hoping to impress the bejeweled man he had just met. He even found one of his best bags of wine and presented it as an intended gift. But in return, the wise man gave him a handful of gold coins, and the merchant had no opportunity to share any of his salesman's stories. It was the wise man who turned out to be the storyteller. The baby didn't look like a king, said the wise man as he wiped grease from his beard with the sleeve of his garment. If you showed me even 2 babies, I couldn't tell you which was the infant king of the Jews. But I would feel it somehow. Yes, I would know for certain if I were in his presence again. What makes you think the baby is a king? The merchant asked, throwing a bone into the campfire. Even I can make that claim. Anyone would claim. The wise man was perturbed at the obvious ignorance of the merchant. Why, it has been prophesied, he said. I can't believe you didn't see the star that lit the sky with magnificent light. Fabulous. There's never been anything like it, and I know. I studied the stars. I followed it and met up unexpectedly with 2 others who traveled with me to Bethlehem, a perfect place for this birth. We were seeing prophecy come true in our very lifetime. The 3 of us met King Herod, who also said he wanted to honor the child. Herod is waiting for word about the new king now. From you? Asked the merchant. The wise man shrugged sheepishly. Perhaps. So why are you headed in the opposite direction? Well, if you must know, I had a dream that warned me not to return to Herod. So what else have you got to eat? Saving himself future trips, the merchant pulled a heavy bag from one of the camels and set it close to the wise man. It's difficult for me to imagine Herod being pleased with the story of a child who will perhaps compete against him, challenge him. The merchant said, thinking for a moment. That light that you spoke of could have come from the palace where the child was born. And what was it you said earlier you gave the child? Frankincense and myrrh? Stuffed with dates and lamb, looking like another mound of sand in the desert, the wise man lay down flat on his back and sighed, a sound of relief that turned into a loud belch. There was no palace. The child was in a simple dwelling, born of simple parents. I think you've been had, said the merchant, poking at the fire. The child's father will sell your gifts. No, it wasn't like that, said the wise man. When we found the child, we knew immediately we were in the right place. As poor as it was, as tired and pathetic as the parents looked, as ragged as their belongings, I felt very humble. We fell to our knees, all of us. We hadn't planned to, but all the strength left our bodies, and we were limp with worship, I suppose. After visiting a new king, I should come away with something material, one would think. But I came away with nothing but awe. But why? Asked the merchant. It was a hoax. Oh, I don't think so, heart tells me now. I may not know all of the secrets of the universe, but I know something miraculous has happened, and I was able to be there before it was over. Long after the wise man had fallen asleep and was snoring, the merchant put his things together, summoned his men, and mounted his camel, starting off into the night, turning around, going in a different direction from which he had come. He set off for Bethlehem, hoping it was not too late to see the miracle. The prophet Isaiah spoke words of light and hope to people who were living in some very dark days. Many had returned recently from exile only to find their homeland in ruins. People were wondering if their lives and city would ever be restored. And I think that for many of us it may seem as though we too are living in some dark days of uncertainty and doubt. And the prophet assures us that if we lift up our eyes and look around, the radiant light of God's grace will shine on us, all of us. I think the story of the wise one reminds us that it's okay to stargaze, for it is in the stargazing that we see the promise of new life that is so generously given